it's well, we started with a plan several years ago that I would at some point make a best of record, and never really kind of gave it much thought beyond that. And I kept making records, and I didn't really believe that I had the material to kind of justify that. And then last two or three albums have been pretty good. You know, I've been pretty happy with the way things have come into focus artistically, and you know, really good band. And I thought, okay, well, it's kind of drawing to that point now where I've got a pretty solid body of work, and then they all dreamed it up in here. They said, like, it was a concept I would never have imagined that's the way we'd do it. But I think the main issue for me is that I needed to get this band that I've got, the Undertow, which I've now had. You know, we've been together for like almost 8 years, and you know, our penetration in Australia has just really built up quite dramatically in the last little while, and independently of any media exposure or anything, we just go out and do work, and the band's really generated a really good just level of awareness for me, and so I just thought that those things should be linked together. So rather than just going out and kind of dragging together all the hard copy of songs I'd recorded, you know, at various points in my career, let's just actually record the set. And I've got, you know, I mean, the set goes back to about 1980. You know, there's particular Hunters songs that I do, and they go back to about 85, and so there's a set of about 36 songs. And rather than just, as I said, do a collected works type thing, let's just look at what the show's like, and then pick the best. Well, actually, yeah. So it was a bit of a struggle working out which songs we were going to play. But anyway, we ended up with 24, and they covered 30 years of songwriting, and they're all performed by the Undertow. So bringing all those things together, and I'm not sure how live it is really. You know, we had a very small audience, and it was a highly controlled environment. You know, like we just had a sort of a big old wooden room and played in the round, and the punters were right in close around us. It's kind of like a workshop in a way, and there was a lot of talk. You know, we didn't kind of try to keep the energy level up or anything like that. We just opened up the show, and I chatted to the audience, and now we're going to play this, and you know, so it was a very free-flowing, intimate kind of exchange, and I think there's about 80 people in the room, something like that.
Yeah. Did you spend much time setting up prior?
Yeah. It's just there's mics everywhere, you're tripping over them, and even the audience are like kind of getting in the way, you know. Like I remember there was one point because we broke the show up into 3 sections, and we had little sort of 15-minute breaks, and so people could go to the bar, and then one side of the room's got this old wooden bar, and it was a very cute place, and I remember coming back the first night. I came back out to do the second set, and there's a woman standing, really nice, you know, she's very friendly. She's standing right next to my microphone, just sort of having a drink, kind of looking around, and you know, and she says, how you going with all this? You know, I said, like, we're actually about to start playing. You know, like, you know, there was kind of, and that didn't happen again, but it was really cool. I just thought the idea that punters kind of really there were no boundaries really. It was just like a lounge room, really. Yeah.
I guess in regards to the sound, it helps having Cameron McKenzie in the band.
Yeah, he does tend to. He's pretty good. Yeah, he's definitely got an agenda. Like he knows what works, you know. And you know, that band's sound. Like he connected as soon as John Favaro arrived on bass. That really, which was, you know, a few years ago now, but that really kind of shifted everything, and that's oddly enough, Cameron got really interested in that, because suddenly John's got a real way of creating space. He can be really quite invisible as a bass player, and then suddenly erupt melodically and just go on these fantastic journeys. Really creative guy, and but I think that really shifted Cameron's attention, and Cameron started talking about, you know, creating space on the records with minimum instrumentation, and we'd kind of been doing that for a while, but I think because when John arrived, it suddenly sounded really big, and that got Cameron really interested, I think, and his production went up another level, you know. Well, it's sort of a mixed feast, really. Like the really well-known ones, like Grail and Arms. I mean, I'd been playing them for so long, and they really were just acoustic journeys, and the band gradually kind of just emerged behind that acoustic sound over the years. So they've kind of been cooked very slowly. But then songs like Say Goodbye, that's kind of quite a recent arrival, and you know, was after we did that Liberation Blue acoustic series. You know, when I did all those, a lot of the people in here did these acoustic recordings, and I sort of worked out, and that was actually quite a big shift for me, because I realised, you know, I could really kind of take control of these songs and just do them in a different way, you know. And I was very, for years, I was really leery of a lot of that stuff, you know, because I just thought, oh, it's kind of in the past and whatever, but it's not. It was kind of like in a way, you know, I was kind of just making life really difficult for myself, you know. But that song, I worked out a way of doing it, kind of like real tin pan, and on an acoustic, and the band really took control of that and like gave it a different. And there's something about the way Mazzy drums too. He's got this really sparse style. It's just like, it's very pulse driven. Like he's quite funky. He's got a very funky approach to drumming. So he's very into pulse. You know, it's not as rock as say Hunters and Collectors were. And songs like that really flourished with The Undertow. The Undertow does that song really well. But, you know, as I said, it's kind of all the Hunters material has been played at one point or another. Some songs like that one are played a lot, but there's other stuff in there I've gone, oh, we've done that before. Let's give that a shot, you know. So stuff was just kind of done, you know. We just went, let's have a go at this, yeah. Like the Dog song, like Dog, you know, like we just jammed that. And I remember we got to the end of that and I said, what does it sound like? And, oh yeah, that'll work. And they were just, you know, oh, that works. That's kind of so different to Hunters, but it's kind of got this thing about it. It's like really dirty, you know, and slow. Yeah.
A friend of mine was at a pretty huge Pearl Jam gig at Wrigley Field last year in Chicago. And the band played Throw Your Arms Around Me, which they have been playing for years.
Really? I know.
Neil Finn plays it all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
When did you first get the sense that that song had a life of its own?
There must have been look, it's really hard to say. Look, I do remember that it had that whole shift that Hunters and Collectors went through, which kind of was you know, it kind of emerged at a time in my songwriting when I started thinking about, I mean, there were certain records I started listening to which were right outside that whole sort of post-punk. You know, in a way, I look at, sort of digressing here, but that period in history from when, you know, a lot of young Melbourne kids were going out and seeing punk bands and listening to records that, you know, they were kind of devotees of Malcolm McLaren. I think the history ground zero was 1977 or whatever, you know, and everything before that was kind of, you know, just the part of the great rock capitalist conspiracy, and we weren't going to engage in it, and, you know. And I kind of felt prey to that, you know, like I was very arty and rebellious, and which is all good. I mean, it's great for kids, you know, when you're young, you think history is bunk, you know, unless you're, you know, possibly American, because the Americans are a lot more respectful of their past. I think that period in history kind of screwed things up a bit in a way. And I remember being, you know, with early Hunters, you know, we're sort of playing around with all these sounds, and, you know, I'd been listening to, you know, I was really into, you know, I'd gotten to the point where I loved the Talking Heads. I'd sort of gone through that whole New York thing, and I'd arrived at the Talking Heads, and just the idea of white funk was just kind of like angular white funk, and the Brits were doing it too, and that's kind of like where Hunters kind of sat, I suppose, at that time. And then I heard Van Morrison, you know. I just discovered Van Morrison. I thought, what's this, you know? And I've never gotten over it. And it kind of coincided with Throw Your Arms Around Me. Was like, wow, I want to write something like that. Because it just reminded me of when I was really young and we listened to Irish music when we were kids. You know, I'm a different kind of Irish music, but folk music was quite a big deal in my family. And, you know, I just really, when I came along with that to the Hunters and Collectors, it was like, there's one guy in the group who went, oh, this is pretty good. But everyone was like, what? You know, I just really, I'm not sure it was as palpable as that, but there was just a sense of, it was really different. And it was kind of a turning point. And Hunters and Collectors, I remember when we made Human Frailty and it got re-recorded. And then at some point, somewhere along the way, either someone from in here or my manager, Michael, just said, you guys really need to re-record that song. It should be on, it's all over radio, because we just weren't getting radio. I mean, we were Triple R, I respectfully have to say that, because I've been into trouble with some of my friends in there before. But, I mean, we got Triple R, essentially. And maybe a bit of Double J in Sydney, but that was pretty much the extent of it. And so, you know, Michael or someone said, look, that song should be. I think we'd done it, we'd been on this big tour, I can't remember what year it was in, we'd already put Human Frailty out, and it had been out for about a year, but I remember we arrived at a gig, the Palace down on the foreshore, and we'd been on this big, long national tour, and this was the end of the tour. And I remember we started playing Throw Your Arms Around Me, and there's you know, close to a couple of thousand people in there, and it just went nuts. The whole room was singing, and I remember someone there that night said, "You've really got to turn this into a commercial song." I mean, you know, because we just had that really angular, brittle sound in those days on record, and so we re-recorded it, and I think that's probably the most profound sense I had of that song at that time, you know, that it did actually have something quite special about it, because we were all surprised.
Yeah.
You know, we just, wow, they're really into this, you know.
So on this new live album, you placed it at track number 4 fairly early on. Is that
I was thinking of putting it number 1 at one point.
Yeah.
Now, what we did, I'm glad you've done this research, it's really good. We basically turned the two albums into a rock and a hard and a soft record. So it's rather than, which is a bit of an experiment. I mean, I had the order of songs pretty much like I would if I was going to do a live performance, and I was going to run them the way they'd been written on the set list. But then I thought, you know, let's just make the records they can each have a theme. One can be more softer and more personal, and the other one can be more commentary and social agenda, you know. And that's how I originally had Throw Your Arms first, actually. It was the first song, and then I kind of bumped it for some reason. I don't know why, but
the album has a great acoustic guitar sound.
Yeah.
What did you use?
Oh, look, actually, I wasn't entirely happy with my acoustic. I always battle with it. I never quite get it right. It's really pivotal. It's right in the guts of the band's sound. Well, the thing about acoustic is, with a band as small as that, you actually find that acoustic can actually take up a real lot of space and create scale invisibly, because it doesn't have a lot of mid-range. It's got extremes of bottoms and tops, and if you're smart about the way you record it, you can actually create scale invisibly, because people don't really notice it as much as they notice electric guitars, because electrics are always really pokey and MIDI, you know. So I use an 808, a Maton 808. I've got several of them. Yeah, in fact, this new one I got about a year ago, they've really got it right. It's this killer 808. Yeah, it's got a lovely belly. They've put a belly underneath it at the back. They've kind of pulled the guts of the guitar out, so there's a kind of slight curve in the back, and they've actually made the sound hole smaller by about 5 mil. And you know, you just touch it, you know, and it's just big and warm, and yeah, beautiful guitar.
Yeah. Last time we spoke, you were saying that the process of writing songs hasn't so much changed for you, but stylistically, the way you use wordplay has. Can you expand on that? Explain.
Oh, look, there's a whole lot of different artists that I just kind of got really caught up with. There's songwriters, American songwriters, but also traditions in folk music and even, you know, that go back much further than, say, contemporary American country or anything like that. I love country. I love good country music. But, you know, going right back to the 60s and Dylan, obviously. Just phrasing and arranging verses in cycles and having punchlines. Like Holy Grail's like that, you know. And that was actually an important shifter for me too, because I remember we worked with a producer who kind of had this angle on arrangements, because he just versed up in a lot of traditional American music, and it got me away from that whole Tin Pan Alley thing of just writing verse, chorus, bridge, verse, pop, just the way pop songs are arranged. So you just have cycles. You have a chord, you've got a shape, and you just design a story over the shape, and you just keep repeating the shape, and at the end, I don't do it all the time, but at the end of each section of words, there's your punchline. And I do that a lot now. So it's kind of like a great reveal. Like it's a great device, you know, when you're arranging a song, to write the lyric in that way, because that way when you stand up in front of the audience, you don't really need the band to be there, because what you're doing is you're drawing your audience's attention. There's your opening line. Here's your you know, you're kind of, I'm going to tell you a story about this, you know, and the opening line's enshrined in that concept, and then gradually the story unfolds, and the reason for all of this is the chorus line, you know. So there's a real sense of, it's slightly detached, but it's very traditional as well, you know. And I do a lot of songs like that now.
Yeah. Are you able to work on several songs at once, or do you like to concentrate on one good idea at a time?
I generally write, I tend to have a particular agenda at time, specifically, you know, like I'm writing at the moment. There's something always in progress. But what I tend to do is I just accumulate lyrics quite experimentally. I just accumulate ideas about human behaviour and things that are going on around me in the world that intrigue me or I have some sort of emotional relationship with. And I'm always got something cooking, but the song itself can quite often just arrive because I've got a couple of lines that are really evocative, and I'll just keep trying different shapes out to make those lines resonate in some way. And, you know, I might have multiple versions of that, combinations of music with those lines, until one day, yes, that's the one, that's how you do it. That's what the emotion is of that. That makes that work. And that could take quite a while, you know. That could just sort of be bubbling away for days and days and days. But that's kind of how I do it. Yeah.
So once this album comes out, will you be taking that show out on the road?
Yeah, we're going to do, well, it'll be an unfolding story. Things will start pop up late in, you know, next year as well. So we're planning on promoting it right through until, you know, sort of midway through next year. You know, I'll be recording another record or starting another record then as well. But in the immediate future, we're going to do this theatre run. There's about 8 shows. They're all over Australia, and we're actually going to have this big 2.5 longer, possibly 3 hours. I don't know, but I haven't written it out yet. But a lot of talk, and I'm going to talk about the songs. You know, it'll be this album plus there may be 1 or 2 more, and I'll talk about the material, and there'll be points when I'll, you know, explain why the songs are the way they are. You know.
Any bucket list projects from Mark Seymour that you want to get to one day that maybe we wouldn't expect from you?
Well, I've written a book and it's gone. I've sent it off to a publisher and I'm just waiting for them to tell me whether it's any good or not. And it's, you know, it's quite a long book. So that would be, you know, I don't know how that's going to work out, but that's my next big goal. Like, there'll be repercussions from that in some form. I mean, I'll either be reshaping it or re-editing it or rewriting it, but it's definitely I'm going to get that. That's kind of like the the next big goal for me.
Yeah. Is it warts and all?
What?
Is it warts and all?
No, it's fiction, but it's kind of a combination of there's several plots running simultaneously, and it's kind of like it's two stories overlaying. There's one in the present and one in the past, but the backstory is vaguely connected with my life. So there are characters floating in it that resemble my late adolescence. I mean, you always write what you know about, but I framed it in a contemporary. There's a contemporary thriller aspect of it as well. I won't give you too much detail, and that's fiction. So I would say you would call it fiction. Yeah.
Right, Mark. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.